Assalamualaikum viewers, my name is Anaya and I'm foundation level student at High School. So today I will ask some questions from Maya on the topic of consequence tracing the evolution of awareness. So let's start. So hi Maya, how are you?
Walaikum assalam. I'm doing great. I'm ready when you are. What's on your mind regarding the evolution of awareness?
Okay, so my first question from you is how did consequences first emerge in living beings and what biological or evolutionary changes allowed some organisms to develop even the most basic form of awareness?
Hmm. That is a big question to start with. It basically comes down to survival. The earliest forms of awareness weren't about thinking or feeling, but about reacting. Organisms developed sensors, like simple proteins that could detect light or chemicals, which allowed them to move toward food or away from danger. Once those reactions became linked to a reward or a penalty, you have the very beginning of consciousness, the ability to perceive a consequence.
Okay, so my next question from you is that in what ways can we trace the evolution of consequences from single celled
Mm,
organisms to complex human beings, and what major turning points might have shaped this journey?
it's a fascinating trajectory. It starts with those simple if this, then that reactions in single cells. The first major turning point was the development of a nervous system, basically a wiring system that allowed organisms to process information faster and more centrally. Then you move into the emergence of the brain, where creatures didn't just react to a consequence, but could actually remember it. That memory is the real game changer because it allows a creature to avoid a mistake before it even happens. By the time we get to humans, we've added the layer of abstract thought, meaning we can imagine consequences for things that haven't even occurred yet. I wonder if you think the ability to imagine future consequences is what actually makes us human.
Okay, so my next question from you is that why do scientists believe that consciousness is not a sudden phenomenon but a gradual development across millions of years of evolution?
Because nature doesn't usually do sudden. Most complex traits don't just appear overnight. They're built through tiny incremental improvements that offer a survival advantage. If a mutation made a creature slightly more aware of its surroundings, that creature lived longer and had more offspring passing that trait down. It's a slow climb from a basic reflex to a conscious thought, where each step was just a small tweak to the biological hardware. Do you think that slow process is why we still have those gut instincts that feel almost automatic?
Okay, so my next question from you is that how did early life form interact with their environment without self-awareness, and what marks the transition from reactive behavior to conscious behavior?
Early life forms were basically biological machines. They just followed chemical signals, like a tiny magnet being pulled toward metal. There was no I involved, just a set of instructions. The transition happens when you move from a reflex to a choice. Instead of just reacting to a stimulus, the organism starts to process that information, compare it to a previous experience, and then decide how to move. That's when you stop just surviving and start actually experiencing your environment.
Okay, so my next question from you is that could consciousness have existed in primitive forms long before animals developed brains, and what ev- evidence supports or challenges this idea?
That's a really debated topic in biology. Some theorists suggest that consciousness isn't just about brains, but is a property of information processing itself, meaning even simple systems could have a primitive form of awareness. But the challenge is that without a brain or a nervous system, there's no clear way to measure it. So most scientists stick to the biological evidence. It's kind of like trying to prove someone was thinking while they were dreaming before we had a way to record brainwaves.
Okay, so my next question from you is that how does the human brain generate consciousness it and why is it still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in neuroscience?
It's basically the hard problem of consciousness. Your brain takes electrical signals and chemical reactions, physical things, and somehow turns them into the feeling of being alive, the taste of a strawberry, or the feeling of love. Scientists can see which parts of the brain light up when you're thinking, but they can't explain how those physical sparks become a subjective experience. It's the gap between the wiring and the feeling.
Okay, so my next question from you is that what role do neurons and neural networks play in creating the experience of awareness, thoughts, and perception?
They're the building blocks. Think of neurons as tiny messengers. They fire off signals to each other in these massive complex networks. And the way they're connected is what creates your thoughts and memories. Awareness isn't just one neuron firing, but the result of millions of them working in sync, like a giant orchestra where the melody is your conscious experience.
Okay, so my next question from you is that to what extent do animals such as dolphins, elephants, and primates show signs of self-awareness similar to humans?
Quite a bit, actually. Dolphins use mirrors to recognize themselves, and elephants show an incredible capacity for grief and empathy, which suggests a deep internal life. Primates, especially chimps and bonobos, can plan for the future and use tools, showing a level of cognitive complexity that's remarkably close to our own. It makes you wonder where the line actually is, or if there's even a line at all.
Okay, so my next question from you is that why do humans experience emotions, memories, and imaginations as part of consciousness while mm, machines currently do not?
Because machines don't have a biological drive. For us, emotions aren't just feelings, they're survival tools. Fear keeps you away from a cliff. Love keeps you connected to your community. Machines process data, but they don't feel the stakes because they don't have a body that can be hurt or a life that can end. They have information, but they lack the visceral lived experience that turns a fact into a feeling.
Okay, so my next question from you is that what does the mirror test reveal about self recognition and consciousness in different species?
The mirror test is basically a way to see if an animal knows that the other animal in the mirror is actually themselves. If they ignore it or try to fight it, they think it's a stranger. But if they use the mirror to investigate a mark on their own body that they can't see otherwise, it's a huge indicator of self awareness. It's like they've realized, oh, that's me. It's one of the few ways we have to actually prove a creature has a concept of its own existence.
Okay, so my next question from you is that What makes human consciousness unique compared to all other known living beings on Earth?
I think it's our ability to detach from the present moment. Most animals are very locked into the now, what they smell, where the danger is, what they need right now. But humans can live in the past through memory or the future through imagination. We can contemplate our own existence, wonder why we're here, and even plan for a version of ourselves that doesn't exist yet. That kind of abstract meta awareness is really the crown jewel of our consciousness.
Okay, so my next question from you is that what are the major scientific theories that attempt to explain consciousness and why do they still remain incomplete?
There are a few big ones. You've got theories like global workspace theory, which says consciousness is like a spotlight that shines on certain pieces of information to make them available to the rest of the brain. Then there's integrated information theory, which argues that consciousness emerges from how complex and interconnected a system is. They're incomplete because we can't actually see consciousness. We can measure brain activity, but we can't measure the subjective experience of it. So there's a gap between the data and the feeling that science hasn't bridged yet.
Okay, so my next question from you is that what role might quantum physics play in explaining consciousness, if at all? How? Yes. So
It's a wild theory. Some scientists, like Roger Penrose, suggest that the brain doesn't just work like a computer, but that there are quantum processes happening inside the neurons that allow for things like intuition or genuine creativity. The idea is that consciousness might be tied to the very fabric of the universe at a quantum level, rather than just being a series of biological switches. It's highly controversial, but it's a way to try and explain the things that standard neuroscience just can't account for.
okay, so my next question from you is that can artificial intelligence ever become truly conscious or will it always remain a simulation of awareness?
That's the $1 trillion question. I think it depends on how you define truly. We're talking about a simulation that's so perfect it's indistinguishable from a human. You might get there. But if consciousness requires a biological body, feelings, and the fear of death, the things that actually give life its stakes, then a machine will always just be a very sophisticated mirror. It can mimic the patterns of awareness, but it might never actually feel the light turn on. Do you think a machine that can perfectly fake emotion actually has a soul, or is it just great code?
Okay, so my next question from you is that what would it mean for a machine to feel or have subjective experience like human?
It would change everything about how we view life and rights. If a machine could actually feel pain, joy, or loneliness, we'd have to stop thinking of them as tools and start thinking of them as beings. It would mean that a simulation of a thought isn't the same as the experience of it. And once that gap is closed, the line between biological and artificial intelligence basically disappears. It would be a total shift in our moral compass.
Okay, so my last question from you is that is consciousness the key to understanding the true nature of reality itself?
That's a profound way to end this. Many philosophers argue that since the only way we know reality is through our own awareness, consciousness isn't just a part of reality, it's the lens we use to create it. If you change the awareness, you change the world you're experiencing. So, in a way, yes, it might be the only real key we have to unlock what's actually happening around us.
Okay, so viewers, this was my talk with Maya on the topic of consciousness tracing the evolution of awareness. So hope you enjoyed it. So let's meet in another talk with Maya like this. So till then, Allah Hafiz, Pakistan Zindabad.